even the most uncomfortable transitions have ultimately led to growth. Having the experience of all those changes and navigating my way through them with each company has been a real benefit.
Are you ready to level up your sales game? Welcome to OnBD with ALF, the podcast that brings you the best advice and success stories from industry leaders in media and advertising. Each episode, we tackle the challenges of new business to help you elevate your own sales strategy. If you're in business development and looking to sharpen your sales techniques, discover actionable insights, and stay ahead of the competition, you're in the right place. Tune in, subscribe, and get ready to take some notes with OnBD with ALF. Today, I'm joined with Dawn Lemen, Sales Director at Boom Radio. Well, I'm really looking forward to chatting with you today. And I'd love to jump straight in and start talking about you, Dawn. A really interesting career to date. Let's start there. Can you give us a bit of an overview?
Yeah, sure. Currently, I live with my partner, and we're very lucky because we have a house in the UK and in France. So at the moment, I'm spending the summer in France, and I don't underestimate how lucky that is. I have two wonderful daughters, Georgina and Naomi, and last September became a grandmother for the first time to Matthias, which is lovely. I never thought another baby, apart from my own two girls, would take my heart, but he certainly has. My career started many years ago. When I left school, I didn't decide not to go to university. I didn't have enough to go to university, and it was something I really wasn't very interested in. So my career started actually at Hertz Rent-A-Car, where I was a sales rep at Manchester Airport. I lived in London and would spend a week in Manchester Airport, come backwards and forwards, and basically just filling out forms and selling car hire. I then moved back to London, and at the time I saw a job advertised for Tyne Tees Television as a receptionist and thought that sounds really quite nice. Quite like to do that. Went to Tyne Tees and was asked by the sales director at the time, Ron Eagle, would I like to go into sales? To which I said, well, I'm not sure what am I selling? I don't actually know what I'm selling. I have no idea about media whatsoever. And he said, come along and try it. And that was where my career started, really, in TV at Tyne Tees Television, way back, as a sales assistant. And I absolutely loved it. It was great fun. Back in the day, it was very, very exciting. All new. Tyne Tees had just split out into its own TV station. Stayed there for a couple of years and then went and worked at Granada TV just to get a promotion and become a sales exec over at Granada. Through that time, I became sales manager, and then obviously throughout the years, I became sales manager of the team, and then the acquisitions and the consolidation of TV companies started. So went through Time Exchange, Laser, you name it. Every company that Granada was trying to buy into was part of what we were doing. So with that came a lot of change. Finally ended up as ITV and finished at ITV as sales operations director, actually, working on ITV and ITV2 at the time. I helped launch ITV2 back in the day, which was great fun. And then really from ITV, it was a time when it was going through a lot of change and a lot of the directors were made redundant. You know, back in those days, that was not really something very usual, whereas unfortunately now it seems to be quite something that happens a fair bit. And I ended up going to work for a company called Dolphin Television, a smaller sales house that was selling S4C and a few other stations. And because I'd worked on S4C for many years back at ITV, I sort of had that heritage with them. So I went to work at Dolphin. Lots of good fun there, lots of sales. We really grew the business. However, Dolphin then sold out to Sky. So that was where I ended up at Sky, working across at Sky Media as head of media partners for many years, actually. it was 7 or 8 years ago now that I took redundancy from Sky and felt I'd done my bit in TV and indeed the media. I'd really enjoyed my career, and it was time now for me to go and spend a bit more time in France, I thought. So off I went, and then COVID hit. And I was actually on gardening leave for a while, but my old boss rang me from Sky, who he'd retired about 2 years previously, and just asked me if I fancied doing a bit of radio because he had a friend who was in a startup and they were looking for a sales director. I was a little bit nervous. A, startup, gosh, that's quite risky. B, radio, never worked in radio. And C, didn't know any, as I thought, didn't know any of the people at Boom. So I thought, why not? I'll speak to them. And the rest really is history. Here I am now at Boom Radio.
That's quite a change, isn't it? So that's two things that you've had to jump from. You've gone from the media giant that was Sky into
Yeah.
now a startup environment, and of course all of this experience in TV, and now you're on radio.
Yes.
So I mean, what does that difference feel like?
I think for me, I was nervous about being in a startup to begin with because I didn't have that business acumen, if you like, for a small business. And I thought, oh, what's it going to be like? What was interesting was I had spoken to a few people who I'd been on on my career journey with and said, look, I've got this opportunity. Do you know anything about these guys, i.e. Phil Riley and David Lloyd, both who have been in radio for years. And everybody that knew them said, Dawn, if you're going to go and work with them, you'll never look back. So for me, it was like, right, that's it. I'm going to take this dive. I think working for a startup, it's the enormous responsibility that you have because it's an independent radio station. It's an independent company. It requires us all to pull together. We're a tiny team looking at a huge, possibly, a huge opportunity here, and we didn't want to muck up. So we all pulled together. My whole team it's a small team, but I think we've just really just got down to the nitty-gritty and got on with it. But with that comes a lot of other responsibilities. I'm on the board, I'm an investor. And so for all the reasons, for the business I want to do well, but also personally, I want the business to do well.
Yeah, of course. And is there much difference between selling, the TV assets and partnerships and everything that you've done previously to then moving into the radio space? What's the kind of the difference for you there?
I think for me, the biggest learning curve, and there was one of the investors and one of the guys there is called Don Thompson, and he's been in the radio business for many, many years. And in fact, what I didn't realize was I actually did know him, but I didn't know he was at Boom. So that was really nice. So he's supported me to start with. And I think for me, it was the way TV is so instant. You can overnight, you see your ratings, or, you can actually see the results. And clients will see a response pretty much as soon as they've had a TV ad go out or something. Radio's not like that. Radio builds over frequency. And I couldn't get my head round, why would you book, 4 or 5 spots a day? And people hear this over and over again, and they need to be on air for much longer. TV, you can put an ad campaign on for a weekend, for example, for a sale. Whereas with radio, primarily you should be on for at least 8 weeks to get the best results. So for me, it was that change that I couldn't get my head around.
Yeah.
And of course, Radar, Barb, you see your ratings every day. You see the performance of your spots or your program. With Radar, you're working 3 to 4 months behind. So what I'm talking to a client today about is 3 months ago data. So it's very dare I say, it's much older in terms, and it's not as sophisticated as TV has become.
Yeah. How do you adapt to that then? If that's, because you're used to selling one way and now it's kind of the opposite of everything that you did in that sense, because it's slower.
Yeah, I think the beauty of working in radio is if people want to hear their ad go out, and people are really, if you get the right client, and we are a very unique radio station, which is why actually the beauty of Boom is we can target so specifically to the right people, because we know our audience so well. But it's really difficult to explain to them. You've got to be on air for longer, because some of them have used TV and gone, well, I only book a week. No, a week's not long enough. And also, there's a huge cost differential between TV and radio, and that's actually an advantage for smaller clients. So I've adapted in terms of just dealing with the clients that the level of clients we deal with, I think. And we do, we tailor everything to a client. We're very bespoke. We're very, very niche. Whereas TV, it's all about get it all out there, get one big brand, and we'll do a partnership and it'll be all singing and dancing. With us and with radio, it's not quite like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet you have to be a bit more kind of creative in some regards, do you? And you've got the flexibility to be as well.
Well, we have. And that's, I think for me, that's the one thing that's lovely, that's so, so good for us. We can get something to air tomorrow. We can turn a competition around over in a day. We can do so many things so quickly because we're such a small team. There's no bureaucracy to go through. There's no programming to go through. There's nothing. You just literally, I talk to David Lloyd, who is the founder of Boom Radio, has his own show. And I say, well, have you got an idea for this? Yeah, we'll do this. And it's up on air the following day if a client wants it that quickly. So we are really, really quick off the foot. We just generate lots of work so quickly because we can, and because we all do everything. That's the beauty of being in a small independent company, I think.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, let's talk about Boom Radio as well. So, because I mean, you guys have had a lot of success recently. Some really good growth.
We have.
So let's talk about that. Let's go through what I'm kind of talking about and why you guys are kind of so successful as well. So take us through that success.
I think when the whole idea of Boom was from David Lloyd and Phil Riley, who felt there was a need for a radio station to talk to baby boomers. I mean, it does what it says on the tin. We're all baby boomers who work at Boom Radio, apart from a couple of my sales girls who are close to boomers, but they're not. And I think it was more about, let's try and see if we can generate a radio station that has got presenters on there that are people we grew up with. So, for example, I now work with Graham Dean, Nikki Horn, David Hamilton. A lot of the people who are listening to this podcast probably go, who the hell are those? However, I've worked with these people. They were my heroes back in the day when I was going to work, listening to Breakfast, listening to Drive Time. Now I work with them. And I think the beauty of Boom and the reason we've been so successful is we talk to our listeners in a very different way. We talk to them like we know their age, but we don't make them feel old. We're all about, as I say to all the clients I speak to, I'm a boomer, but I'm still working. I'm working full time. I've got a lot of responsibilities. I've got lots of stuff I want to do, but actually the Boom listener is the same person. You're talking to a Boom listener. And if you want to reach that audience, there is no better place than Boom Radio in terms of radio, because we're so unique. And I think really the reason it's done so well is because we respect our listeners. We talk to them in a way that they're used to being talked to. We play the music that they love. And it is a music station at the end of the day. We have very little chat on there. And we talk about, my first car, my first wedding dance. These are all little features across the radio station. And the engagement is massive from our listeners. That's not to say, though, we've spent a fair bit on marketing, because at the end of the day, we've got to get our message out there. There's 14 million boomers. We're reaching just around 700,000 of them in a week. So we've still got a long way to go. But we've certainly exploded our business plan beyond anything we ever felt was going to be real for us.
So much more growth to come, you see.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, also let's talk about that audience as well, because I think I remember when we had a chat before, I always remember it being called, I hate to say it, but the grey pound. I think it's now called the silver pound, isn't it? Is that right?
It's the grey,
Um,
the silver. Yeah, it's
yeah,
basically, yeah. There's a lot of companies now called silver something, so
yeah.
it's
I
what it is.
I understand, but that particular audience is really interesting because, like you say, as consumers, they're really interesting and not necessarily targeted that often. So can you just kind of explain what that silver pound is and how you actually go about selling it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't want people to be confused by this. Silver
Mm.
pound, it's not the quantity of silver measured by weight, first of all. Let's just make it clear. We're talking about the baby boomer, really. We're the silver market, the baby boomer spending patterns and behaviors. And that's really what we talk about. It's a demographic. We're aged mid-50s, 60s, 70s. That's the sort of era that we're talking about. Now, I know when I look back and I was in my 30s, if I spoke to a person in their mid-60s, they were old. That's not the case now. We are still working. We're empty nesters. We've got a bucket list to fulfill. And more importantly, we've probably got a lot more disposable income than most generations. Yeah, we are a very lucky generation in terms of what we've achieved in our lives. So I think marketing to that generation with the right brand, they'll try it. They want to be marketed to, they want to be sold to, but they want to be sold to in a respectful manner and be respected for their experience and their knowledge, really. And that's
Mm.
more for me, that's where this all sits, where we fit in so well with that silver market.
Yeah, of course. It must be. It must be sometimes. How would I say this? Tricky in the sales process when you're talking to a brand or a marketing department at a brand. Do you have to kind of explain this market to them and persuade them, or are there brands out there that are very clear of what they're doing and why they would work with you?
I think there's two
Both.
angles to that. There's two areas. So there are the clients who own their own businesses, who are probably of a similar age and who know that that is their target audience. Um, all they need to be convinced about is that we're the right platform for them to reach their customers. And let's be honest, that's the easy sell. That is the easy
Hmm.
sell. The other one you have, and probably more of these than the other than the former, you get clients who maybe aren't quite the baby boomer, but they're close, but they actually feel their product should be targeted to the more younger generation. And even then, trying to persuade them that actually this generation is really interested in your brand. We really feel that, they would really be interested to hear what you've got to say. Many feel, well, you're too old for me. You're too old. It's too old. And yet it's that dare I say, that stereotype of what an older person is, and that's the barriers we come against quite a lot of the time. I think as well, the other issue we get is within a company, we'll get to speak to the owner who actually probably is older and understands the concept, but then says, "Well, I need to pass you on to my marketing department." And then the marketing department come along and quite possibly they're in their 30s go, "Oh, no, that's not what we need to do. No, no, no." And then the owner is more swayed by what the marketing team do. It's those people we have to convince. And at the end of the day, why would they listen to Boom Radio? And this is what I say to them when I meet with them, I don't expect you to know Boom because you're not our target market. But what I'd like to show you is why I think your brand would work well on Boom and why Boom would work well with your brand.
Mm.
And those are the challenges.
Yeah, it is because it's a double sell, isn't it? You're having to sell the media in its
Yes.
own right and sell the concept of the audience
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of our challenges, our biggest challenge is a lot of brands of this demographic will use press, will use magazines, will use direct mail, and trying to encourage them to actually
Mm.
use Boom as as complementary that's the challenge we have, because so many, well, I've never used radio before. Oh no, I don't. I've got a voucher on in a magazine. I've got a voucher people can use, and they all go there, and you're like, no, they don't. So it's really difficult to say. But if you just add some Boom Radio onto you're reaching people that probably don't read that magazine or have that direct mail. So that's
Yeah.
another challenge.
Why is that? Why is radio not a common medium for those brands?
I Well, I think one of the issues that particularly advertisers might find, brands might find, is what rate, before Boom, what radio station would these advertisers really need? Well, it would be
Mm.
Radio 2, because that's the age, that was the age group before they went younger that really they would have wanted to be on, but you can't advertise on Radio 2. So I think the others is like, well, they're all young, they all feel young, or it's just not for me. So we'll stick with what we've always done: direct
Mm.
mail and in magazines and press. And I think it's just, for us, it's like, no, we really are a station for you. That's why we were born. That's why we launched, because Radio 2 went younger. And wouldn't you have loved to have advertised on Radio 2? Then you should be with us.
Yeah. Okay. That's quite a powerful message.
It is.
Yeah.
And many, many clients totally empathize with that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. So, I mean, it sounds really exciting what's going on what's going on at Boom, and definitely kind of one to watch. I've loved hearing about that sell, essentially, that you've got to provide, because it's got so many challenges. But I suppose every role has its challenge, and you've had a career that spans lots of different roles and across a range of media. So I suppose in that breadth of your career, what have you seen in terms of the biggest changes that have happened over your career, and how have you had to navigate them?
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously by now I will guess that anyone listening to this podcast will have some idea that I'm not a newbie, that I'm not someone who's just coming to the business. And I think from my days in Tyne Tees to my days in radio, goodness me, the media business has been through so much change, both organically with agencies consolidating, TV companies consolidating, the digital era, the takeovers of Sky being bought out by Comcast, the Americans come in, it's Paramount buying Channel 5. It's just changed so much. And I think one thing I've found with me going through all of those changes is I've been lucky enough to understand what's going on and be part of the change, whether it be in that company or when everything went digital, managing that change and going through testing of what's going on. I was able to be part of those changes, which was
Mm.
really helpful for me. One campaign with Barb and originally Sky, I was part of that to start with, and it was good to understand the changes that were going ahead and really get to grips with what the benefits were going to be. Lots of bumps in the road with all the changes, but ultimately what the benefits were going to be. I think really I've been through multiple consolidations myself. I've come to see, that the processes can be difficult, really, really difficult. The chapters that follow often bring, renewed energy and fresh excitement, but also downsides too, really. Even the most uncomfortable transitions have ultimately led to growth for me,
Mm.
and also when you look at the companies, possibly for the companies too. So, professionally and personally, I think for me, having the experience of all those changes and navigating my way through them with each company has been a real benefit. And it's kept me confident and up to speed to be able to say, do you know what? I'm going to try radio now.
Yeah, exactly. Great. I've got to ask, because we were having a chat about this the other week, Dawn. What's your most memorable win that you've ever done?
My most memorable win. I think really, it was for me when I was at Sky. That was
Okay.
probably the biggest thing. My boss at the time, Richard Hawkin, who's a lovely guy, and he really wanted to empower you to take responsibility. And I hadn't been there long, and he said, "There you go. You can just do this deal." And it was a very big deal. And I was as nervous as hell, even though I've been in the business years and done it all before. But I wanted to prove to Sky and to him that I could do it. And it went on for a long time. It was a really difficult negotiation, but it was the best day when I got the phone call to say, "Yeah, we're going to agree that." And I was so excited. Went back to Richard, and everyone was over the moon because it was something we were potentially going to lose.
Mm.
And not only did we win it, but we won it on better terms. It was really, for me, that really springboarded my confidence again. Because
Yeah.
I'd lost a bit of confidence, if I was honest, leaving ITV, going to Dolphin. And, you have transitions, and at times you get a bit of imposter syndrome, I guess. I certainly had it when I went to Sky. So to do that, just reevaluated where I was and thought, yeah, you know what? It's good. I can do this.
Yeah. And is that, you mentioned before about all of these changes, but then you get this revamp of energy. It sounds like that deal might be for you what kind of led to that next revamp of energy.
Quite possibly, quite
Yeah,
possibly. And I think
definitely.
there was one thing, it wasn't something I was very proud of, but something that really springboarded me every time was when I was at ITV working. I just had my first daughter, Naomi, and I come back, and I always remember my boss at the time. He said to me, "Never ever, be rude to any of your people you work with or your clients." He said, "Because one day you might work for them."
Mhm.
And I've held that really close because he's absolutely right. And sure enough, I have ended up working for people that I've been dealing with,
Yeah.
and being respectful has really helped, because why get angry or really hack people off when you don't need to? Because it's such a small world, the media world.
Yeah, exactly. And you've explained with your stories these names that keep coming up and people that you work with now that you dealt with in the past. So I suppose it just shows, yeah, you should always be gracious, and you're always building a network, aren't you? You never know when that network is gonna take on a new look and a
Oh,
new
no,
medium and relaunch your career in media in the future.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the strangest things that's happened to me since being at Boom was, there was an agency and a brand that one of my team was dealing with, and they said, "Oh, look, I'm going away. Could you ring this person up?" Or, "No, he wants to speak to you because he's not happy about something." And I said, "Okay." So I said, "Give me his number." So I took his number, and I tapped it in his phone, and his name come up. And I looked, and I thought, "Hang on, this person, oh my goodness, this is someone I worked with at Tyne Tees 40 years ago." And this was a guy that was buying airtime from
Yeah.
us on Boom Radio.
Yeah.
Needless to say, we work together now, and he's had a very different journey to me, and we've just, yeah, gone back and clicked again, which is great, which is great.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Um, I've loved hearing about Boom, loved hearing about the audience, and in particular, loved hearing about your career, Dawn, because it does, it spans a lot of experience, and it's. I always find it interesting to see somebody's journey and the twists and turns that it kind of brings. What I'm quite keen to do is hear a little bit about you and sales, which I would like to do via my quickfire questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
are you ready?
I am.
I'm saying that you don't actually have to be quick. I just like calling them quickfire questions. Um,
I'm
so
not quick 'cause
Dawn,
I have an answer.
so Dawn, what's your favorite thing about sales?
For me, it's the variety of businesses and people you meet. You might have gathered, Amanda, from me. I love chatting.
Hmm.
I love talking to people. I love hearing their stories. I think working with people, talking with people, meeting new people, understanding their businesses, working on their objectives and finding the fit with our business. How do they fit together, and how can we work together? And also, I think it's not a quick fire, is it? But I think also just meeting these people and having lasting relationships, because actually, they do come back again and again, and it's really nice. I think
Yeah.
it's testament to both sides then, which is
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. I definitely see you as a people person, Dawn, I
Oh,
think.
really? Yeah. The other thing was, I would say, is it's the feeling when you win something that was really not likely to happen. That, for
Yeah,
me, you think that's not gonna happen and it comes through. Oh, fantastic.
that's the best. Um, what's something that nobody's talking about right now when it comes to the industry or the sales industry?
I think, well, people are beginning to talk about it now, but I think it's more about, um, the cost of living, how that's faring with people, and also what's happening with consolidation again, WPP merging with,
Mhm.
Group M, and that's not nice for individuals, but it's potentially good for the business. So I think there's people are feeling a little bit nervous about what's going on in media. There's a lot of change. The digital era is upon us, VOD and all of that, which has been with us ages, but everything's changing so quickly. And I think the one thing that a lot of people now will be talking about, but we haven't yet, is AI. And
Mm,
not just the benefits of AI, but the negatives of AI. I mean, an example is currently, we have clients now who say, "I don't need anyone to produce my ad. I'm gonna get it from AI." And you just want to go, "No, no, 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 no." I think that's something that we will need to raise as an industry,
mm.
and use it wisely. It's a great tool, but let's not let people lose jobs through it. That's my take.
Yeah, yeah. That I think, that's obviously very relevant with what's been going on with the news in some pretty serious media companies at the
Yeah.
moment as well. And you yourself has said throughout your career, you've seen all this change, and I mean, is this something that you've experienced and seen before? Does it feel does it feel different now?
Um, AI, yeah, AI does feel different, and if I'm honest, I have really battled with not using it. I've really said, "No, that's it. I'm not using it. This is not for me." Even I've given in and I've started to
Mm,
use it, and um, I think we should all, as I say, we've got to embrace it. We've got to embrace if everything's evolving. We can't stop the world from evolving, but what we can do is get on the journey so that it's a positive journey for everyone and not a negative one.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Um, Dawn, if you could go back to your past self, when you were just starting out in the industry, so, when we're going back to you going applying for that receptionist job, and it taking a different turn, what would be one piece of advice that you'd give yourself?
I think I would give myself, um, be confident, but don't be cocky. You can do it. And if someone recognizes something in you, believe it. Don't diss it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Love that. Love that. Um, you've managed a lot of salespeople and sold yourself. So
Mm.
in your experience, what do you think makes a good salesperson great?
It's really interesting because when you can interview people, and if they come across as a good salesman, you think these are going to be great. And sometimes they come and they're not good. They haven't
Mm,
got really, an interview is one piece of the jigsaw. So for me, someone who listens, and doesn't just talk at people and doesn't take in the detail, someone who listens, takes the time to understand the client and does their research about that client so that they can be on the same page as that client, um, makes the client feel like they care as much about their business as the client does himself. And I think having empathy is a huge benefit. If you're someone that's not able to have, everyone's got empathy, but use it in a way that makes that client feel listened to, valued. Those are good salespeople.
So the secret really is to actually care, behind that sell and the client and what you're
Absolutely.
providing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay. Cool.
I'll be honest now, I've got a team of 3 girls, and they really, really worry if a campaign is not performing as it should do. And they'll come to me and go, "What else can we do? We really want this to work, because if it doesn't work, this client's not gonna, what's the point of the client coming back?" And I think they really care, and that comes across to the client, who then will say, "Do you know what? It might not have done what I thought it would do, but let's give it another go," because they know we care.
Yeah. That's what builds trust ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've got to agree with you on that, Dawn. I think that's a great element of what takes a good salesperson into being a brilliant salesperson. Now back to your own career. So reflecting on your journey, if we made a movie out of your career, what would you call it?
I thought about this. There's lots of different. I think the first one was, I looked at Working Girl, and then I thought, "Oh, no, that's got all sorts of connotations. No, we won't go with that one." I think for me, because my journey started with no intention of being in media, not understanding anything about advertising, not really ever considering that path, it's gotta be off script and on air. That would be that
Love
would be
that.
the film.
Yep, off script and on air.
Yeah.
Coming to cinemas near
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah.
And I have to ask this in relation to, you've now got a career in music, Dawn, and radio. So what is your hype song before you have a big pitch? You must have one, do
Do you know
you?
what I love?
Yep.
Ready for You by Black Coffee and Celeste.
Yes.
Love it.
Brilliant.
And
Do you put
that's
that
the
on
one
in the office before a
that's the
big
one I
client
play.
meeting?
Absolutely.
Great. Oh, fantastic. I think I'm gonna have to start a playlist with all of these kind of hype
You
songs
should,
from
yeah.
across the industry now.
I'm sure there'd be very different angles too coming through, depending on the age group probably as well.
Yeah, maybe. Great. Look, Dawn, it's been lovely speaking with you. Really excited to see what happens with Boom Radio. You've obviously got a growing, established, engaged audience right now. As you said, 700,000 with the aim of, was it 14 million is the
Well,
market?
wouldn't that be nice? Goodness me,
There you go.
I would be going off into the sunset. Yeah, 14 million boomers. I'm not sure we'll get to that level, but no, there's no harm in dreaming.
Exactly. But yeah, a growing audience for Boom. So it sounds like a really interesting growing business, but also there's a strong solution there for brands that want to reach this audience that is sometimes neglected. And really interesting to hear how you're targeting them and educating them on how they can do that through radio. And looking forward to where you'll be going again in 10 years, Dawn. Outdoor, maybe? Jump into press?
I think I'm firmly gonna say, Boom's. I'm gonna finish on a high, and that'll be with Boom.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. Thanks for joining, Dawn. And I hope those listening got some good tidbits for their own career. As
Thank
they
you,
go through it.
Amanda. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Dawn. And that's a wrap. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your colleagues and friends. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next month with more expert advice and success stories. See you next time.